Okay guys, I'm going to go over the Unit 2 review. Starting with number 1, state whether the relation represents a function or not. As you can see that there are 4 different domain values, so this is a function. Okay, so remember when I do not see repeated x values, it is a function. Okay, moving over to the I do part. On the I do part as well, it's in a list. So remember that if I do not see repeated x values, it is a function. So this is a function as well. Moving on to number 2, state whether the relation represents a function or not. Remember, we're going to use something called the vertical line test. So if I draw vertical lines through this circle, notice that it crosses the x-axis, it crosses the graph of the circle twice. It crosses it here, for example, right here, and it crosses it here. So this is not a function, okay? Not a function. Then moving over to number 2 over here, I can go ahead and draw, again, vertical lines through each of my discrete points. And I notice that each vertical line only has one black point. So yes, this is a function. Moving on to number 3, state whether the relation represents a function or not. Here's another example. Again, go ahead and either highlight or always underline the very first number in each coordinate. So as you can see, I do not have any repeated values, so this is a function. Yes, it's a function. And I look over to number 3 over here, state whether the relation represents a function or not. This is not a function because I see -1 twice, so no. Then I move on to number 4. Now we're looking at evaluating a function at different x values. Okay, so here, these are my x values inside of g of -2 and g of 3. This means I replace every x right here with the number given to me. So in this situation, I'm going to have 3 times -2 squared plus 1. What does this tell me? This is going to be 3 times 4 plus 1. Sorry about that. And then this will give me 12 plus 1, and that's going to give me 13. Okay. Now, if I look at the next problem, the next part, I have g of 3. So now I'm going to have 3 times 3 squared plus 1. What does that tell me? I'm going to square the 3 first. So I'll have 3 times 9 plus 1. And that's going to give me 27 plus 1. That gives me 28. Moving over to the right, number 4, you're doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and blow it up just a little bit more so I have some more space. Again, I'm going to take 2 times -1 squared minus 4. So this will give me 2 times 1 minus 4. So then this will give me 2 minus 4. This gives me -2. So I guess you can kind of get the picture of what you're going to do here. I'm going to plug, I'm going to plug 4 now into the equation. into here, and I should get 2 times 4 squared minus 4. And I'll let you guys go ahead and do that math there. I already gave 3 examples. Okay, moving on, we're looking at using the graph to find the following. So here I have f of 3, and on f of 3, again, I'm going to look at where is this 3 at on the x-axis. So this 3 is right here on the x-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw a line going all the way down till I touch the graph. So I touch the graph right here. And so I look over to the left to see what's the y point of that part of the graph. So that's going to tell me it's -4. Okay? So now the next question is find x when y equals 4. So when y equals 4, I go all the way up over here. So that's where y equals to 4. So then I look down and I see that x equals -1 when y equals 4. One more time, if I look at when y equals -2, I go over here, then I look up and I notice that it's at 2. So x equals 2 when y equals -2. So moving over to number 5 on the right over here, use the given graph to find the following. Again, f of 2. This is where 2 is at, so I'm going to look at 2 right here. I'm going to go ahead and move up to the graph, and then I move over to the left till I hit the y-axis, and I notice that it is at 8. So this is f of 2 equals 8. The next one is when y is equal to -4, I go down here to -4, and I move over to the right, and then I move up, and I notice that x equals -4 when y equals -4 here. When y equals to 8, again, for some reason, this is the same thing as this one of f of 2 equals 8. So therefore, x equals 2. Okay? It asks, find the domain and range of the graph of f of x below. So you have this curve right here of f of x. And I'm going to draw vertical lines through these points, the endpoints here, because I actually have 2 endpoints. I have an endpoint here, and I have an endpoint there. So my vertical line crosses this point, and it crosses this point here. Let me redraw that. So here, I know that I start at -8 and I go all the way to +2. So my domain will read x is in between -8 and 2, and then I need to write down the proper inequality. So for 2, x is less than and equal to 2. And for -8, x is greater than -8. And the reason for that is I have an open circle here to show this. Okay? And then I have a dark circle here to show y over here. Okay? Then I look at my range. Again, I have to look at the lowest point of the range to the highest point of the range. So my lowest point is at the bottom of that curve, and I'm going to start at -4, and the highest point is all the way up here, which hits it at 9. So my range goes from -4 to 9, and I have y in between. Now, what do I use as my inequality? Since this lowest point is a solid curve, I'm going to use y is greater than and equal to, because there's not a hole there. It's a solid curve. at the very top, where the red line crosses through the hole, there's a hole there at 9. So I have to use y is less than 9. So that is my domain and range for that function. Now, moving over to number 6, you notice that find the domain and range of this function. Now, I mentioned this yesterday. If I have an arrow at the end of my graph right here, then this is going toward infinity. In this situation, this is going toward negative infinity. So my domain, written for this, I can only draw a vertical line through the right endpoint here. So that's crossing it at 8. So x is less than 8, but greater than negative infinity. So another way of writing this will just be x is less than 8. And this is how you would probably see this on an exam for a question like this. When you have an arrowhead, it will only just care about one endpoint because that's where you stop. So here, any value less than 8 satisfies the graph of this function. For the range, I draw a horizontal line to the top point, and notice that I highlight 8. So this will read y is less than 8. Again, because of the hole, that's the reason why I use the inequality sign here. Again, it's all values less than 8. So from here all the way down, because of this arrow, it's everything less than 8 forever. Okay, so for number 7, I'm looking for the domain range of a discrete function. So as you see here, I'm going to go ahead and draw vertical lines through every single point to start off to find out my domain. So here, this point, this point, this point, and this point. So as you see here, my domain are 5 distinct points. So my domain is going to be -8, -5, -2, -1, and 5. Or sorry, 7. Okay? Then for my range, I'm going to draw horizontal lines through each of my points. And I'm going to list them from bottom to top. So my range starts at -5, then -2, then 2, 3, and 7. So on number 7 on the I do part is the exact same thing as number 7 on the we do part. Draw 5 vertical lines to show where your domain's at, and then draw 5 horizontal lines to see where your range is going to be. Your domain and range will both have 0 for this point right here. So I'm moving on to number 8 on the we do part. It says, given the graph of f of x below, based on this graph, what is the value of f of -2? So if I look at this here, -2 is inside here. That's the x point I have to see. And then I'm going to go ahead and find it on the x-axis here. So that's where it's at here on the x-axis. So what does that mean? When I draw a line going up to that point, I move over horizontally, and f of -2 equals to positive 2. Now, if I move over here to number 8, given is the graph of g of x below. Based on this graph, what is the value of g of 0? So again, this is my x point I have to find on the x-axis. Here it is there. And then I draw a line going straight down. So where does it hit? It's going to hit -1. So g of 0 is equal to -1. So here we're going to go back to our last of our two equations here, the graphs. We're going to state the domain and range. Again, I'm going to draw a vertical line through this point. Okay, so what does that tell me? That my domain starts at -4. But notice this arrow means it's going toward positive infinity. So what I have is x is less than positive infinity, but x is greater than -4. For my range, I'm going to cross that starting point at -8. So y is going to be in between -8, but as you see, I also go up to positive infinity again. So y is less than infinity, but y is also greater than -8. Remember that there was a hole at the starting point right here. So that's why I use this as my inequality for both my x and my y. Over here is a very crucial statement I'm going to make. Anytime that I see that there is arrows on both ends of the graph, my domain will always be all real numbers. Because it's going to grow left to right no matter what on the x-axis forever. So it looks like this in inequality notation. And then my range, well here I can see that the highest point of the range is here. So that's starting at 7, or ending, I should say ending at 7. So y can only be less than or equal to 7. So since the graph is growing downward here and here, it's growing down. So the highest point is 7. It can be all y values at 7 and less than that. Okay. The very last couple problems, again, is doing evaluation of a function at x values. Again, remember that these are your x values, and so I'm going to put it into the function. So for example, f of -2 is telling me to do 2 times -2 squared minus 7, which equals to 2 times -2 squared is -2 times -2, which gives me 4, minus 7. Then 2 times 4 is 8. Then 8 minus 7 equals 1. That's my answer. So you'll do the same thing for 3 and 5, and then practice again for number 10 over here. So for example, like number 10, I'll do f of -3. So again, these numbers are my x values. Okay? So what is this rule telling me to do? It's telling me to take -3 times the square of -3 plus 2. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square the negative 3. So when I square the negative 3, I get positive 9 plus 2. Then negative 3 times 9 is negative 27. Still having to add 2. And negative 27 plus 2 is 25. So that's my answer. Okay? So hopefully that's enough for what you have to do for today. Just please, you can use this on the test for Friday.